Our speakers today are Meryl, Alex and Philip. Before I hand over to Meryl, I wanted to share the results of the live poll we just did with the audience participating on this webinar.
So my name is Meryl Fernando. I'm a product manager in the Microsoft Entra team. I work in the customer experience team. I help a lot of large customers deploy Microsoft Entra. And one of the things I got an opportunity is to help one very big customer roll out passkeys. I think at the time, one of the largest passkeys deployment in Australia. So there were lots of lessons learned. And I want to share some how things have improved since we did that like a few years ago. So for those who don't know, I also run like a weekly podcast and a newsletter on Entra News and call Entra Chat. So you can see that. If you have any questions during this session, like post them here. We want this to be interactive. But also you can reach out to me on LinkedIn and other social media. So if you go to meryl.net, you can see the links off to all of my social media. So just to level set for people who have just come in here. I know for those who are coming to the session and you want to learn about rolling out passkeys and FIDO2 keys, you don't need to be convinced. But I just want to level set for people who might not be across all of this, right? So passwords are bad as a credential because it's really hard to defend against them, right? So users would use the same password across multiple systems, or they use passwords that can be easily predicted. They can be phished with just by seeing the login page, they type the password in, and password sprays another thing. And I'll show you some of the information that we at Microsoft are seeing. So passwords plus MFA is better, but the problem is that traditional MFA can also be phished, and you have problems like rolling it out and how it slows down users. And what we're going to talk about today is more the cryptographically sound hardware-backed security. And these are the newer ones that we are going to look at how you can deploy them at scale. So just to set some context, we at Microsoft are seeing a massive increase in phishing. Some of my customers I work with, they are seeing not just phishing attacks, they're seeing lots of password spray attacks coming into their tenant. If you open up your sign-in logs in your Entra login page, you will see the amount of phishing, the password spray attempts, etc., that's coming. And what we do know is that more than 99% of these attacks are all like identity based. And just for some stats that we have, last year we saw 7,000 password attacks per second that's coming in through Entra. So overall, as an Entra scale, that's the level of what we are seeing from password sprays, phishing attacks, and breach replays. So these were like happening at rate of like 7,000 attacks per second. Now, once you deploy MFA, you improve the resistance with the traditional MFA. But what we also noticed is that there were these other attacks like SIM jacking, social engineering of the users, or they do the adversary in the middle attack, the sort of man in the middle attack to get in. We were seeing that less. It's about in the rate of tens of thousands of attacks per month, but that's still there. And even with phishing, what we do see is this is still small. We see them only like thousands in a month, things like token theft and identity compromise. But you can see the scale, right? Like going from 7,000 a second to only seeing 1,000 a month. This is across all of Microsoft login from Entra and so on. So the promise with passwordless and phishing-resistant auth is to remove that vector of a standalone password, a better experience than passwords and MFA, and moving to strong, device-based auth that's on a device and it's phishing resistant. Now, these are stats we have that we measure as users sign in across all of our consumer accounts. So this is Microsoft account, people signing into Outlook and Microsoft 365 Personal, Teams, and all of these other sign-in scenarios. What we are seeing there is, for example, with password, it takes 24 seconds for a person to typically sign in. When they use password and MFA, it goes up a lot, almost 70 seconds for them to complete that entire flow, right? So that's the amount of time that they spend signing in. But once you introduce passkeys, the users that are using passkeys, that's dropping down to 8 seconds. So in terms of the speed and user experience, it's a lot more seamless for the users as they move to the stronger passkeys and things we are going to talk about today. Now, a little bit of a story is I helped, as I was telling you, one of our large customers in Australia deploy passkeys to, like it was an Australia-wide effort, and they were rolling it out to all the users in all of the sort of in Australia. And this was about a few years ago that we did that rollout. The problem at that time was none of the new APIs that we are going to share about today, all the services didn't exist. So it was a lot of manual sort of writing scripts and doing workarounds. They had to technically sort of log in as the user. The admin had to provision like thousands of keys, and they had to log in as the end user, plug the key in, burn their registration in, and then plug it out, make sure they didn't mix up the keys and send it to the right person. And there was a lot that could go wrong in that. And even just setting up that process took such a long time because there was no way to bulk provision FIDO2 keys when you have thousands of users and you want to roll out passkeys to them. So late last year, Microsoft introduced the FIDO key provisioning API that lets you automate a lot of this. And our partners like Yubico and others have built custom solutions. And Alex was sharing about a really neat way. They even have a new service that they do where it's very seamless for rolling it out in that way. So I'm really excited to see him, share how all of that works. So with that, I'll hand over to Alex to talk through us, all of the different options you have to roll out passkeys in bulk.
Thank you, Meryl. So, thank you for joining the webinar. And it's fun to join with Meryl and Phil around this topic. I am the Director of Solution Engineering, so I look after the technical aspects of Yubico across Asia, Pacific, and Japan, and have been doing for about 8 years now. Today, we're going to focus on passkeys and enabling passkeys and the problem that it solves, but also the tooling that is now available to everyone generally to allow you to adopt passkeys quicker and easier for your users. So Meryl's already spoken about the problem with passwords, and passwords have been perfectly suited to giving people access to data over the past 60 years, but it is 60-year-old technology. Generally, most of us are not using anything on our desk that's more than a few years old. So passwords have passed their prime. There's a lot of P's there. So we need to rethink cybersecurity. And eliminating passwords as much as possible can close the most commonly exploited attack surface. And the metrics are out there to show that. But a couple of other things in there that I constantly have discussed with customers and discussed with technology partners is around some of the other parts to this. Often when I speak to customers, they say, yes, we're going to give MFA just to our privileged users. So the ones that log in as admin, the ones that need to administer network equipment. And so what we're trying to educate people is that anyone who works in your organization is trusted to access data. Even if they're customer facing, if they are on the telephone answering calls, if they're logging data, every user within your organization who has a username and password is a privileged user. The bad guy doesn't care who they hack. As long as they can get into one person, they would then laterally start to deploy tooling into the network. And you've seen the data breaches that occur. The next thing to think about the rethinking is zero trust. Zero trust has been around for a long time. However, that term trust, only granting trusted users the correct access at the right time. Identity verification is something that I believe is crucial to recovery options or backup options. Identity verification is crucial to ensuring that you remain phishing resistant and highly secure. Historically with passkeys and historically with FIDO, where passkeys have came from, passkeys or FIDO credentials have been difficult to register. Generally, the back-end services offer two APIs. One is for registration, and it requires about 6 steps through multiple screens to register a key. And the other one is authentication, which is very simple, very quick. But that registration process has been a blockage and a limitation for those adopting passkeys. So the industry is listening. Microsoft and others are exposing APIs that allow us to adopt passkeys quicker, and vendors such as Yubico, and there is another 5 or 10 vendors out there, all who are supporting this concept of let's allow people to register passkeys easily and quickly on behalf of the users so they can log in and just move on. Okay, why do we need to do this? Why are we considering increasing the adoption of passkeys? And Merrill's pyramid of passwords getting constantly attacked, thousands per second, moving up to the MFA layer. If we look at the most recent social engineering attacks that have been going on in Asia Pacific and in the world, what's happening is the attacker is going after either new device registration flows or recovery flows. There are onboarding flows as well that could be attacked, but generally it's the recovery flow where they will phone up a help desk operator and say, hey, my name's Alex Wilson, I've lost my mobile, I don't have access to my 2FA. Can you help me log back in again? And so identity verification begins over a telephone line, which is interesting. And then at some point, they allow you to fall back to a less secure multi-factor or two-factor authentication method. And that has been played out in the press over the past 5 or 6 months quite clearly. So account recovery, staying at the highest level of authentication, so that if you did lose one passkey, you should have another passkey in a different device, whether it's your mobile, your laptop, or on a YubiKey or a security key. You should have more than one credential, so we allow you to have multiple passkeys. Device registration is another area where attackers may choose to engineer or socially engineer you. We all get new laptops or new mobile phones every few years. Is all of our credentials moved over easily? What we say is using a physical key that is purely there to allow you to provide that root of trust, that verification that I have this credential and I can reinitialize that device back into the network. So these are different times when attackers will go after your data. Now, what has Yubico launched specifically in line with the Microsoft API that they've published, but also with Okta? So identity providers are building these APIs for easy passkey registration and adoption. I have a brief video here. It's about 1 minute 30, it shouldn't be long. I'm going to be quiet while it plays. There's 2 components to it. We'll be focusing on the client tool, the technical tool after this.
Getting your users up and running with YubiKeys is easier than ever with the Yubico Enrollment Suite. Get choice in managing delivery of YubiKeys to your users so they can go passwordless quickly and become phishing-resistant users in minutes. The Yubico Enrollment Suite consists of 2 parts, Yubico FIDO Pre-Reg and YubiEnroll. Yubico FIDO Pre-Reg is a premium service that delivers factory-enrolled, pre-programmed keys to new or existing users with an easy-to-use client application. With Yubico FIDO Pre-Reg, you can reduce the burden on IT and your users. And YubiEnroll can help IT easily pre-enroll new or reclaimed YubiKeys on behalf of users at their premises. You can speed up IT processes to get users protected faster. Today's modern threat landscape requires a new approach, and the Yubico Enrollment Suite delivers a complete registration experience for enterprises of all sizes. Supported by our strategic partners, the Yubico Enrollment Suite ensures your users will get YubiKeys to secure the devices they love and will never have access to your IAM systems. Fast-track your journey to passwordless and become a phishing-resistant organization. Support your digital transformation with the Yubico Enrollment Suite.
So the YubiEnrollment Suite, or the Yubico Enrollment Suite, as covered there, provides two options. One is a full logistic and programming service that we offer from our factories in Stockholm, the US, and soon to be available over a small short-term to medium-term within Asia-Pacific and Japan. It is a trusted premium service based off a subscription capability, where within your service desk, within your organization, you would have a new user, you would make a request. I'm ordering them a laptop, they may need a mobile phone, and they will need a physical security key with passkeys. You push a button, in a few days' time, a key, a YubiKey, is delivered to the user anywhere in the world. And then separately, a PIN, just like a credit card experience. This is not foreign to us. A PIN arrives at the same time or in a separate channel. Whether it's the manager has the PIN or you post it to them, that is for you to decide. The user can then use the key, plug it into their new laptop, authenticate immediately once they've changed the PIN. So no more registration. Separately, we've also launched a command line tool called YubiEnroll, which is, again, you're acting as a trusted individual within your organization, and it is a client application that allows you to enroll passkeys into Entra or Okta at this time, and that will expand with time through other identity management platforms. But this is freely available for anyone who owns a YubiKey or a security key from Yubico. You can use this tool. I'm going to focus on that tool from a technical perspective just over the next few minutes. Key use cases: administrators managing a small organization, a couple of hundred users or greater, and wants to get over that registration burden. I want to give them a key, give them a PIN, get them logging in very quickly within phishing-resistant aspects. Easily resetting keys afterwards if you require. You could, as an organization, outsource this to a trusted partner. So the trusted partner would have this tool and would remotely register keys on your behalf for your users. YubiEnroll, small scale. I mean, by small scale, it depends on the organization. This can be scripted. However, with YubiEnroll, we're programming one key at one time. I can sequence many, so I can plug one key in, unplug, plug one key in. But generally, it's one key at a time. If you're looking for scale and programming and distribution and logistics, then the Yubico FIDO pre-reg. So what we're going to do is do a demo. So I'm running YubiEnroll, and I have a YubiKey. I'm going to do a little bit of activity with. I have Entra. Just run a couple of commands on this. So I'm running the client on my Windows client, and we're connected to an Entra tenant that I have control over. I'm authenticated as a trusted individual. So who has rights to perform these actions? Remembering, I'm creating the authentication credential for a user to get access to everything that they're allowed to get access to. So I'm authenticating as a trusted user. With this account, the account name is YE5, YubiEnroll 5, and I'm just querying the list of credentials or passkeys that are already registered for that user. So that's querying Entra. If I went into portal.azure.com and had a look at the user account, you could see, hey, they've registered 2 passkeys. So I'm going to delete one of them and then re-register it. That one is going to list the ones that are available. I know that my serial number is number 1. Sorry, the one ending in 429. We're going to delete that credential. So that's removing the MFA capability, the back end, the public key portion of a passkey from the back end. That is now gone. If I just do list again, it will show that it's gone. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is follow through and register or add one for YE5. Now, it's querying Entra, and it's saying, hey, which key are we going to use? Now, I've got a YubiKey plugged in. I'm going to touch the key. So I know that if I had more than one key plugged in, it would give me that, hey, you've got more than one key. Please touch a key. But we have a profile configured. So if I have outsourced this to a trusted individual, they could just run a script, plug the key in, plug the key out, depending on how the profile is set up. What are we going to do to this key? Are we going to reset the key? It's possible that we'll take a key from a user they're already using and program a passkey on top of that key. I would need to know the PIN. However, something we could do. If we're going to reset the key, we're going to set a PIN length. The default PIN length for the standard FIDO credential is 4 digits or 4 alphanumerics. We can increase that. So we're going to move it to 6, and we're going to create a random PIN length. Do we want to force PIN change on first use? We're going to say yes. So force PIN change is on. Always require user verification and attestation, slightly more advanced topics. So do you want to proceed? We're going to say yes. Remove the key. Now, there is a bit of key shuffling. You have to take it out, take it back in, touch the key, creating the credential on the key, touch it again. So this is to stop remote execution attacks. So if someone's got a YubiKey plugged in and someone gets a remote application running, could they reset your key? No, they couldn't. So we have a PIN, temporary PIN is set. That could be put to a log, and then we move on. So YubiEnroll, you can download it. You need the talk to the API with an Entra. You get a client ID. There's very simple documentation, and it's relatively straightforward to go through to create the passkey. Now I'm going to go back to the presentation. I have a brief video here of the PIN getting changed scenario. It's not that hard, whether it's Windows 11 or there is a Chrome capability where it recognizes a flag on the credential that the PIN must be changed at first login. So it asks you to change the PIN, and then it will log you in as that user. Okay, so the login demo is so boring, it takes 10 seconds. There's no point in going into that, but the YubiEnroll tool is there for you. All right, I'm going to hand over to Phil and let him.
You hand over. There's one question that's Daniel is asking: is this tool available in non-interactive mode?
And so the tool is available. However, back to remote execution, you must physically interact with the key to program a passkey onto the key, so that you must unplug the key, plug it back in, touch the key, which is the user presence. So certain amount of scripting you can do, but beyond that, no, you must physically plug and unplug.
There's another question. Is there like a UX that you have other than a command line to do?
Perfect question. That is coming. It's on our roadmap. This is now 1.1 version. We launched it at the same time as Microsoft launched the API in December. As I think we're waiting on Microsoft to move it to general availability, although it all works. We will then have a GUI version, much nicer, but you still have to plug the key.
And Trevor is asking, you have a list of countries that the Yubi enrollment service is available.
We have, it's a logistical thing. I think we support 175 countries globally, and we can provide this procurement through the channel, because within our region we do channel distribution. Other parts of the world we do direct. So we're more than happy to work on that with you, but the API programming is working with you. We then become trusted, or a partner can become trusted. And that's a discussion we can get into.
Cool. Awesome. So keep the questions coming. I'll hand over to Phil to walk us through the Silverfort side of doing all the on-prem side of the story here. And then we can come back to the questions at the end.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Merrill. Hopefully you are all able to see a screen. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
Fantastic. So I'm going to go through Silverfort and how we're going to extend those YubiKeys, those ones that have been pre-registered and pre-enrolled in Entra ID. I'm going to show you how we can extend those and enable FIDO2 multi-factor authentication for legacy applications and systems that don't even natively support it. But before I start, there's one quick poll question that we'd welcome your response to, please. So Alyssa, if you're able to, thank you. Okay. So got a few little bits of statistics up here, kind of a pretty even number across most of it, but we've got some general stats. About half of you saying that legacy systems is a problem, provisioning and rolling out passkeys is an issue, and user adoption of experience concerns is an issue. So those are the top three out of there, all very, very close, similar matched scores. So legacy systems, provisioning, rollout of passkeys, and user adoption experience concerns. So I think we've tackled those pretty well, right? We've covered the user experience. Merrill talked about the speed at which a user is able to then authenticate and log into applications and systems, so greatly improving their experience there. Alex has just talked about the ability to use those new provisioning APIs to help with the provisioning of the FIDO2 tokens or these passkeys and to roll them out. And I'm going to touch on how we can augment your legacy systems so that we can use them for them. Thank you very much for that. So today, most organizations have a hybrid identity environment that consists of both Windows Active Directory and at least one other identity provider, something like Entra ID, Okta, Ping, etc. This is normally coupled with a bit of a patchwork of other point solutions, so something for MFA, something for PAM, something for identity threat detection response, security posture management, and so on. Customers tell us that there are several high-risk identity security blind spots that they've been struggling to address, right? Especially where they still have a dependency on Windows Active Directory. Right? So these include things such as the lack of visibility into configuration hygiene issues in the identity infrastructure. We're seeing an explosion in the growth of non-human identities like service accounts. And now the next topic that we're going to talk about is AI agents, right? Impractical or unfriendly privileged access controls, right? All of these things contribute to an increase in your identity attack surface that attackers are regularly targeting. And then poor coverage of multi-factor authentication is something that is regularly exploited by attackers. This top one, multi-factor authentication, it's a very effective control at stopping attackers from using compromised credentials to gain initial access to networks, to escalate privileges and move laterally through them, ultimately causing data breaches. We need to make better use of this control. The question is how? How do we get that coverage better? The Silverfort has produced a service or an offering called our Identity Security Platform, and it aims to break down these silos of identity security, eliminating the gaps and the blind spots that we've just previously covered, right? Integrate this fragmented identity security capabilities, integrate them all into a single platform. I think it's important to note here, Silverfort does not replace your identity infrastructure, right? It's not here to replace things like Active Directory, Entra ID, Okta Ping, etc. It's here to integrate with them and to complement them. We want to bring together things like your ITDR and ISPM capabilities, non-human identity security and privileged access controls, and even more recently, AI agent security capabilities. Bring them together in a single platform. But the one that I want to focus on in this webinar is multi-factor authentication. Everybody's already touched on this. We know that the ransomware cybersecurity advisories around the world, they all talk about a common urgent recommendation to take, right? Implement multi-factor authentication today. Ideally, using phishing-resistant multi-factor authentication, such as the Yubico YubiKeys that Alex has already talked about, right? They are the gold standard for phishing-resistant MFA. MFA acts as this crucial barrier that significantly reduces the risks of account compromises and data breaches, even if passwords are stolen. But coverage of MFA is a terribly common weakness. We see it exploited by attackers. We know it can be effective, so why are we struggling to close this gap? Technology debt is a major factor. We've already seen from that poll, right? Legacy applications and systems, right? Organizations struggle to decommission legacy core line of business systems that do not support multi-factor authentication, let alone phishing-resistant MFA using something like a FIDO2 passkeys. You may have heard of the expression living off the land tools or living off the land binaries, right? Many built-in operating system tools that are used by legitimate IT admins also don't support MFA. So attackers take advantage of this. They live off the land, they use the same tools, and they use it to get around your MFA. And then there are complex critical infrastructure systems, closed circuit or air-gapped networks used in OT environments, where it can be very costly or impractical to integrate your traditional MFA solutions into this. Now, I'm going to change tack slightly, and I'm going to keep things a little bit interesting. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some demos of Silverfort enforcing the use of FIDO2 multi-factor authentication in a couple of scenarios where it was previously difficult or even impossible to do. But first, let me tell you a little bit about what I have. We've used the YubiEnrollment delivery service, the FIDO2 pre-reg service. So what I've received is I've received a YubiKey. In fact, not one, I've actually received two YubiKeys. Two separate YubiKeys, two separate envelopes. So I've got a primary and a backup. These are pre-enrolled in our demo Entra ID tenant. It was delivered to me via courier. It required I first showed my ID and then had to sign for it. Separately, I also received my initial PIN. I actually received that via text message because we've integrated our HR system that has our email and our phone numbers and stuff into the YubiEnroll delivery service. And so therefore I was able to receive the PIN, the initial PIN, via my text message. And so before this webinar, I've actually logged in using these YubiKeys and pins to make sure they worked. They did work, but as Alex showed you in his demo, there was a setting where it forced me to change my PIN. So I've already done that. I've already plugged them in. I've changed my PIN and now we're away. But now for the demonstrations. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you two main scenarios. One's going to be remote desktop. The other one's going to be using a command line tool to map a network file share. You're able to see a command prompt over here on the left.
Yes.
Google browser and this. Right. So let me just show you, let's just explain a couple of things of what's going on here. I'm going to make a remote desktop connection to a server. I'm going to use my valid Windows Active Directory credentials to authenticate to it. It's going to use the Kerberos protocol to authenticate. I've got a Silverfort policy that's going to require I use a YubiKey. right? This YubiKeys is pre-registered in Entra ID, as I've already talked about. It's already been delivered to me. I've already changed my PIN. It's going to make me use that YubiKey to explicitly verify myself before I get granted access to the remote desktop server. Now, this application itself doesn't have any native MFA capabilities or FIDO2 capabilities built into it. And so what I have is I have a Microsoft Teams session over here, and you'll see in it that I have a Teams app installed called the Silverfort Authenticator. This here is to give me a visual notification that I'm trying to connect to something and it requires me to verify myself. When I verify myself, it's going to open up a web page to ask me to authenticate to Entra ID for that session so that I can then verify with my FIDO2 token. So I'm just going to minimize these here. I'm going to just plug in my YubiKey here. I'm going to connect to the application server. You'll see it's going ahead. It's going away and trying to connect over here. Down at the bottom, I've now received a message from the Silverfort Authenticator app that I need to sign in with Entra ID. I click over here. I'm going to go ahead to sign in with my Entra ID credentials. Let me log in with my demo account here. It's looking for my face or fingerprint. Obviously, I'm using a security key. I'm going to select that. I'm going to put in my PIN number. I'm going to click OK. This has user verification required, so I actually have to touch my key to verify my physical sort of presence with that key. It's going to go ahead and say I've successfully signed in. I can now close this window. So I'll close that window down. Let me just minimize these. And over here on the left, you'll see that it's finally connected to the remote desktop session. The next example, mapping a network drive, mapping a file. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you me doing this through a command line, right? So this is a command line tool, built-in operating system tool, does not have any native MFA support. In fact, this tool's probably been around since like Windows 95, if not earlier days, right? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and map a network drive to an application server. I'm going to log in with my Active Directory credentials. I'll go ahead and do this. It's going to ask me to type in my password here. And I've done that. It's now going to go ahead and try and authenticate to get to the server, but notice I've just received a prompt to say, are you trying to map a network drive? Please sign in with Entra ID. I go ahead, click, I'm going to sign in with Entra ID. It's going to come up again, pick my account. So it's going to ask me if I want to use my security key. So I'm going to select our security key. I'm going to put my PIN number in for the security key. And then it's going to ask me to touch it to verify that I'm actually alive and here. And then I will continue to proceed. This will now come up and say that I've successfully signed in and the command has been completed successfully. Now, if I have a look at the K drive over here, you'll see that there's a whole bunch of sort of company secrets and credit card data and M&A secrets and all sorts of other things that exist in this folder. Let me now delete that drive mapping. I wanted to quickly show you how the Silverfort platform works in the back end, and then I'm going to go through into a couple of more demos, show you doing this using a command line tool to Unix box, and I'm going to show you an old 32-bit GUI application accessing a SQL database. But how does this work? Right, if we look at the way that authentication works today, Silverfort wants to be integrating into environment in a way that's very, very non-intrusive and very quick to deploy. And so if we look at authentication today, a user or an admin wants to access a resource. In order to access that resource, they need to authenticate. Authenticate goes and hits Active Directory. Active Directory processes it, and we use our built-in runtime access protection technology to reach out to the Silverfort platform for a second opinion. Silverfort platform analyzes the request and triggers a policy based on that request. For example, apply a multi-factor authentication. Now, in the case of the MFA, what we're doing is we're reaching out to Microsoft Entra ID. We have a conditional access policy that says I need to verify myself with my FIDO2 token, my pre-enrolled, pre-registered Yubico key. That takes place, the verdict's returned back up to Active Directory, and we just return a policy to Active Directory to say you've successfully verified yourself or not. Windows then grants access based on that verdict, and you're able to successfully access the resource. No proxies, without any application changes, and it just reuses your existing user workflows. So back to the demos, and okay, so first demo I'm going to do is I'm going to SSH into a Unix server. This Unix server uses the Radius pluggable authentication module so that it can authenticate me against my Windows Active Directory. And I've got a policy that's going to require that I use my YubiKey again in order to verify myself. So we go ahead and we SSH here, connects to the Unix host, asks me to put in my credentials. That's now going to go ahead, use Radius, authenticate against Active Directory, AD, runtime access protection has kicked in and said, hold on, you need to verify with your Entra ID credentials. I'm going to go ahead here, use my Entra ID credentials to verify myself. And it's going to come up and it's going to ask me to verify my security key. I'm going to insert it here, put in my PIN number again, and I'm going to touch the key to verify myself. So that's completed. I've verified myself. Silverfort's now returned the verdict back to Active Directory. Active Directory now returns the verdict to the Unix host and says, yep, that's successfully completed and you're able to log on. And so there you see, successfully applied that to a SSH session that doesn't have any native support for multi-factor authentication, let alone using a FIDO2 token. But that's not the most exciting one. Now we're really going to be testing the demo gods here. So I've got an old 32-bit GUI application. This application is used to access a database, a SQL database of highly sensitive information. It has no native MFA capabilities. It uses credentials from my desktop login, and it's even going to use the NTLM protocol from the 1990s for authentication. Right? Even cyber insurers don't like this risk exposure, this scenario. Right? Potentially could even lead to policy exclusions or even a denial of claims. What I'm first going to do, though, is I'm going to show you being able to access this without a Silverfort policy enabled. And so you'll see here, I've got a policy that says that Phil's going to use NTLM to authenticate to this SQL database with this application. And if he does, he's going to have to use his YubiKey to do it. At the moment, I've turned this policy off. And so that's off at the moment. And so when I go ahead and use this application, just like normal, it's going to go ahead, it's going to connect to the SQL database, it's going to return the secret information. And I now know that Clark Kent's got a top secret ID of this. I know what his birthday is, and I also know his weakness is kryptonite. This could be a SAP ERP application. This could be a student record management system. It could be any other application, typical client-server application that you've got in your environment today. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing with this application. I'm just going to turn the policy on Silverfort, which you would have seen me do. While that's going ahead and just turning that policy on, I'll just show you quickly in the logs here that Phil was able to come from his Windows laptop, connecting to that SQL database, and I successfully authenticated using NTLM, so legacy authentication. But now what we're going to do is we've turned this policy on. It's going to say that for that Active Directory authentication that uses NTLM, when I connect to it, I need to reach out to Entra ID, where I have a conditional access policy that's going to require a high assurance of authentication. It's going to require I use my FIDO2 token, my pre-enrolled, pre-registered YubiKey in order to access it. So let's go back over to the application again. I'm going to now click the list all agents. I'm going to authenticate with my built-in Active Directory credentials. But hey, hold on, I now need to use my YubiKey to verify access. I sign in with my Entra ID credentials. I'm taken to the page to verify myself. I'm going to use my YubiKey as my phishing-resistant multi-factor authentication. I enter my PIN. I touch my YubiKey to verify my physical presence. Verification is successful, and therefore I'm able to access the secret information in the database. That concludes my demo.
Thanks, Phil. I'll just quickly launch the last poll for everyone. Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining. First of all, thank you to our speakers, Meryl, Alex, and Phil. And before we close the webinar, I would like to say thank you everyone for making time to join our webinar and to sign up for this. And if you want to join Silverfort for a hands-on lab experience at our Test Flight World Tour, please feel free to register your entrance through the link on the screen or through our main website under Company and Events section. This is everything. This is all for the webinar. I hope you found this useful and insightful, and we will get in touch with you with the summary of the polls and questions that we weren't able to answer today. Thank you again and have a great day.